about churches. We're talking about the importance and the beauty of what it means to be one church, right? Our church is not just about Journey Church. Our church, our congregation is about the Church of Waukegan and what God is doing in our city through us, but through other churches as well. Churches that are different denominations, but all of them, of course, Bible-believing, right? Christ-centered, with just different traditions. And we've come together to worship God in the best way we know how. But we've partnered with each other and we have blessed each other. I want to show you Pastor Luke and his wife, Megan. I don't know how many of you guys know them. They are amazing, amazing, beautiful people. They are not from this area, and they decided to come and live in the south side of Waukegan. You could probably tell that they didn't grow up anywhere near Waukegan or this kind of demographics. And yet they chose to come here and to serve the poor of the poorest in Waukegan. They actually started their church in front of the housing projects downtown so that they could serve those on the margins of our society. And they planted the church, I don't know, I want to say maybe 10 years ago. And God blessed them with the ability to purchase a building. And it's been beautiful. As you can imagine, it's been miracle after miracle to make that happen for a church in our community with very low resources to be able to purchase a land. And so all the things that have been done in the building, of course, if you can imagine, if they're selling a building, it means that they stopped maintaining it and they stopped upgrading it like 30 years ago. And eventually it died off. Kind of like when we got our buildings, it was like stepping back in 1960. And it smelled like 1962. Those of us that were here know. Okay. Same thing with them. And a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of different churches have helped to be able to remodel their church and to get it going and to be a place where they can serve God. And right now, they're in the last stretch of needing someone to work tile. So if any of you know how to work tile and would love to serve this church, ultimately to serve the church of our community, if you could please come and see me. They need tiling in 2 of the bathrooms. You don't need to do both of the bathrooms, but if you do know how to tile and you would like to volunteer, we would love for that, to be able to partner with them and bless them in this capacity. All right, finally, let's get to the sermon for today. And today we're wrapping up the sermon series called Embracing Doubt. And I've really liked this series for even my own self and my own study and my own wrestling. Next week, we're going to start a whole new series, the opposite of this, which is, we call it We Believe. And we're going to take a look at the Apostles' Creed. And okay, yes, there's doubts and there's questions, but what are the solid things that for the last 2,000 years, Christ followers have said? Yeah, we may be able to disagree on some things, but these are the things that we can't disagree upon because the Bible is extremely clear about that. So we'll take a look at that based on the Apostles' Creed, and it's called We Believe. But today we will wrap this up with When Nothing Makes Sense. I want to tell a story, and probably those of you guys that have been here a long time have heard this story, but it's been a long time since I shared it. When I was in the Air Force, I was really struggling whether I should leave the Air Force and go to seminary. I was doing really, really well in the Air Force. God blessed me. I won awards. I got a really good position. I had a special duty assignment. It seems like God was really blessing me in the Air Force. And yet the opportunity and always the plan was to actually go to seminary, not because I wanted to be a pastor, just because the Air Force was going to pay for me to go get my master's. And I wanted to just be equipped. I was in my early 20s, and I really, really wanted to have a robust foundation to my faith. Not ever thinking I would be a pastor. I just desired that, and my heart desired that. So actually, but when it came time to it, I was like, maybe God doesn't want me to go, because that takes a lot of faith, and I'm doing really well in the Air Force. Right? In fact, my dream was always to go back to Florida, and because of the position that I was in, if I renewed, they actually would give me the opportunity to go to Florida and actually work with the Air Force Base that actually works with NASA in Cape Canaveral. And as a kid, I always dreamed of being an astronaut. I didn't have the brains for that or the education for that. But now this was beautiful. I get to be in Florida and I get to work with NASA. And so it was a really beautiful opportunity. And it seemed like God was aligning everything. And I remember reading a book. It's called Too Busy Not to Pray. Too busy not to pray. And that book changed my life in that season. Maybe if I read it now, it wouldn't be that meaningful, but at that moment in my life, it did change me. And I remember reading the book on my bed, and Mina wasn't there when I was reading it in my bed, but I remember just reading. I don't even remember what I was reading, but in that moment, I just felt God saying, I'm inviting you to more. Yes, leave the Air Force to go to seminary. I got a plan. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I was like, all right, God, I'll be faithful. I'll be faithful. I'll leave all of this and I'll go to seminary. So I worked everything out. I actually, the last semester the last 6 months, I did a semester part-time in the seminary. I got to know the school. We would travel over there, and I was ready to move to the seminary. I got out of the Air Force August 28th, and I would start like at the beginning of September, seminary. So everything was lined up. All of a sudden, we need to leave our jobs, Mina as well. And now we need to move to an extremely expensive area where the seminary is at, in San Francisco area, right next to the Golden Gate Bridge. So all the people that live by the seminary, they all have Porsches, they all have Range Rovers. Everything was super expensive. But, we're going to live inside the seminary. So we're good. So I started applying for jobs there. And this is crazy. You know how they say, like, you're overqualified for a job? I thought that was only in the movies. No, they told me that. Like, I was trying to just get some little part-time job to get a little bit of money. They're like, we can't hire you. You're overqualified. I'm like, what do you mean overqualified? I could just do the job. And then I learned that if they hire you, usually the supervisor, then they're intimidated that you're actually going to take their job. And I'll be like, hey, listen, I just want to go to school and make, $15 an hour. That's it. I was having a hard time. Mina was having a hard time finding a job. But then eventually, they told us on August 29th. Remember, August 28th, I got out of the Air Force. August 29th, they said, we don't have a place for you to live. There is no more housing. I was like, are you kidding me? I can't just go back to the Air Force and be like, I changed my mind. I'm already out of the Air Force. I was like, God, this does not make sense. What are you doing to me? I'm trying to be faithful to you. I'm trying to follow what you're saying. And then you're throwing all kinds of curveballs to me. Right? And then I had to figure it out. I'm like, what am I going to do? We haven't even gotten a job. Like, I don't even have a place to stay. This is extremely expensive. This is like the Lake Forest of Chicago. This is where all the rich people live that worked in San Francisco downtown. I was like, this makes no sense. God, what are you doing? And I was in my 20s, so I was pretty upset. I did my part. I was expecting God to do his part. But things don't always work out that way. And things got really difficult. And things got really hairy. Then I was like, maybe I'm supposed to go to a different seminary. So now I started applying and looking at other different seminaries all over the country. Eventually, it all fell into place. And they gave us a housing, but they didn't have any more housing. They only had housing for family. So Mina and I that had no kids, they gave us an actual apartment with 2 bedrooms. So it worked out better because when family would come over, we actually had an extra room. Nobody in the entire seminary had that. We did. But we didn't know that in the middle of it. In the middle, we were questioning everything. And I was questioning God. Right? Sometimes maybe you can relate a little bit to that, where all of a sudden you get hit with doubts and you are just questioning everything. Or maybe it's the whole season in which you have questions that won't stop. Maybe you're in a hospital room and you get diagnosed with something crazy, like I did. Right? Or maybe you're in a funeral home holding back tears saying, how could this be? Right? I'm still reminded by Milena, one of the family members of the Colombian, where the husband, just very young, active, healthy, all of a sudden he dies. He leaves 2 young kids and a wife that is young. It made no sense. Maybe you are in that place or you have been in this place. So here's the reality. It's not a matter of if you have faith questions. It's a matter of when you're going to have them. Because they will come your way. But I want to be brief with this. The prophet Habakkuk gives us an amazing, amazing example of how do we wrestle through this. And the prophet Habakkuk is actually a small little book in the Old Testament. It's only 3 chapters, and it's so powerful. In fact, you could read it and play it like on your app, and it'll take you a whole 6 minutes to read the whole entire book. You could say, hey, I read a book of the Bible. In fact, I was driving from North Chicago to my house, and I stopped to get chicken, at the best place over there in Green Bay. And between that, I heard the whole entire book 4 times. So you could go home and read it. You can hear it and get the whole entire book. It is powerful and it's amazing. And here's the thing. Let me give you some context. The prophet Habakkuk was in the 17th century BC. So that means it was 2,600 years ago in Judah, current day Israel, Jerusalem area. All right. He is a prophet of God. And man, it is a massive political, moral instability. There is corruption everywhere, right? Like people all the time tell me, it's like, oh man, do you think it's the end of the world because things are so bad? And when people tell me that, I'm like, yeah, it could be the end of the world. But the problem is you don't know history. There's been way worse times than what we're living right now. Way worse. And in fact, in this moment, it was outright corrupt, right? No one believed in the one true God anymore. The priests, the prophets, and the judges were corrupt. They would actually take bribes. The temple, there was actually temple prostitution. There was idol worshiping in the temple. In fact, there was child sacrifices. You're hearing that correctly. Child sacrifices at the temple. And it was a common practice for you to sacrifice your own child to appease the favor of a false god named Molech. And you can Google that. You can research that. It's fascinating and extremely, extremely hurtful to know that this is what was going on at that time. People lived in daily fear that Babylonians were going to come and conquer them. Almost everyone is suffering. And it seemed like God did not care. And the prophet Habakkuk, right, what does he do? He's like, God, I take it all in strive. You're on the throne. It's all good. You do you. This is righteous suffering. No, he did not do that. You know what he did? He complained to God. He was frustrated. He didn't know what was going on. And in fact, the whole entire book is him 2 complaints to God. It says first complaint, and he goes hard at God. And then God responds and says it's going to get worse. And then he complains again. Right? And it said right there, Habakkuk's second complaint. And he gives this very thoughtful process of the prophet complaining to God that this doesn't make sense. And then the 3rd chapter is a praise song of worship. How does that happen? Well, let's take a look at it. It says this on the very beginning of the chapter, verses 2 and 3 in the first one. It says, how long, Lord, must I call for help? Right? Everything is falling apart, and I've been calling for help, and you're not coming through. But you do not listen, or cry out to you violence, but you do not save. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. You ever felt like that? Like, God, what are you doing? This is crazy. There's human trafficking going on. There's people dying from overdose. This is horrible. There's violence everywhere. God, why aren't you doing anything? That's where the prophet is at, right? And I love this because he's not being dramatic. He's being real, and he's being honest. So we need to learn something from his interaction, though, which is extremely important, and that is this. That real faith isn't denying doubt. It's actually being honest about our doubts. It's just being honest. Here's the thing. Faith and frustration can coexist. Faith and frustration can coexist. You can question God and yet still believe in God, right? Now, some Christ followers think that asking questions is a lack of faith, right? It's not a lack of faith. It is a desire for a deeper faith. Because if we have questions, it's because the brain that God has given us is saying, this isn't aligning, this isn't making sense, God. Like, I want to believe in you, I want to trust you, But man, in my own limited mind, I know you give me a brain and I only use about 12%. I probably use about 10. But in my 10% that you created, that I can only use a certain amount, it ain't making sense. And yet, we can struggle and believe at the same time. Maybe something rattles you, and it could be many things, right? It could be, but it could be this. It could be that the lead pastor that led you to Christ and that God used to shape you and mold you and for you to grow is unfaithful to his wife. And now you're questioning everything. I know many of us have been there, right here in this church. Right? Maybe your friend has struggled with infertility and you pray, and finally they're pregnant, but then they conceive and the baby doesn't make it. And you don't understand how in the world that could happen. Right? Maybe you pleaded with God to restore your marriage and your spouse still walked away. Maybe you beg God for a spouse because you're lonely and you're single and you want to live in purity and you want a spouse that will help you be able to worship God and serve him better. But you're still alone. See, maybe a problem comes your way, you're faced with questions that you can't answer, and it feels like you only have two options. It feels like these are the only two options you have. You either deny your faith or you actually deny your questions. And neither one of these are healthy. But it seems like we have no other choice but those two. See, the first one says, God, I tried, I trusted, I went to church, I read my Bible, I went to small group, you let me down, I can't trust you. I deny my faith. The second one is that you push down the questions, the concerns, the doubts, right? And you pretend like they don't exist. And you try believing, but they're still there in the back of your mind. And you know what happens? That neither one of these lead to a good or healthy place internally. None of these. The beautiful thing, though, is that in the prophet Habakkuk, we see a third option that he gives us. And that is this. The doubt is not the end. See, that you can doubt and you can continually seek God at the same time. You can doubt and you can trust, right? At the same time, they can coexist. In fact, that's what the name of this prophet meant. Look at the Hebrew name. And this is what it means. It means to wrestle and to embrace, right? To say, God, I don't get you and all. I mean, his name represents the book. It's so amazing. And God is letting us know that we can wrestle and embrace at the same time. Habakkuk tells God honestly, listen, I don't like it. I don't get it. And then God responds even in a shockingly way. This is shocking. God says it's going to get worse. He says this, he says, I'm raising up Babylonians. Remember, these people they claim to be God's people, but man, there's all kinds of evilness going on, and God is going to discipline them. He says, I'm going to raise up the Babylonians. They're ruthless and impious people, right, who swept across the whole earth to seize dwellings, not their own. They are feared and dreaded people. They all come and intend on violence. So in other words, God is saying, not only that, I'm going to use this evil people to discipline my own people. And the prophet is like, no, don't do that. What are you doing? Do you know that the scripture says that God disciplines those he loves? We don't need to go too much in this, right? But I've said this a million times. We've all seen them at Target and at Sam's and at Walmart and everywhere else where there's families. Is that child that doesn't get disciplined, are they happy? No, they're little monsters. They're little monsters. So you can't just let your child be the adult and let them do whatever they want, because that's actually not good for them. When they grow up to be adults, they're going to be jerks. Right? So your job as a parent, because you love them, is to discipline them. There's times in which God disciplines us in which it doesn't make sense to us. But we can trust. Now check out this amazing response that the prophet gives. He says, Lord, are you not from everlasting? So now he's giving God his proper place. Are you not from everlasting, my God, my Holy One? You will never die. You, Lord, have appointed the Babylonians, the evil people, right, that are going to come and conquer us, to execute judgment on us. But you, my rock, have ordained them to punish us. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Now check this out. This verse here is amazing. It says, why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? In other words, he's saying, God, I still don't agree with you. Because those people that are going to come and destroy us, we're actually more righteous than them. And they're going to come and destroy us. So the prophet is not having it. He is complaining and complaining to God, bringing his doubts and his frustrations to him, right? But here's the thing. He's saying, God, I trust you. You are righteous. You are perfect. But I'm confused because this doesn't seem fair. Why don't you do something? I know that you can. Let me give you a breakdown of the 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is the prophet wondering what is going on. And that's bad. Chapter 2 is even worse, is waiting on God. Who's good at waiting? Let me see some hands. Okay, good. I'm glad you're being honest. Because if your phone buffers for 3 seconds, you die. What is going on? And it's been 3 seconds, but to you it's 30 minutes. Especially if it's a good video. We're not good at waiting. But the first chapter is about wondering what's going on. The second chapter is about waiting on God. But all of this, and listen, the Psalms do this as well. This frustration, this doubts, this hurt of wondering and waiting eventually lead to worshiping God. Take a look at this. This is amazing. It says this in the very first chapter, chapter 3, right? It says, this prayer was sung. In other words, he created a worship song as a prayer. But the word there, song, is very unique in the Hebrew. And I have to unpack it because it's so beautiful. The meaning is so beautiful and we don't capture it in the English. This word, it's like the way that it's saying, not just a song, but how it was sung. In other words, it gives the tone. So it could be a song that is a love song, or a song that is sad, or a song that is, blues, or a song that is jazzed up, or a song that is rocked out, right? It kind of gives the tune. And take a look at what this word is. It is a prayer that is done in worship, but look at the definition. A wild what? Passionate song with rapid tempo. A cry of what? Adoration, unwavering what? Trust and bold confidence expressed through heartfelt worship when? In uncertainty. Do you see the beauty of this? The prophet comes before God and says, listen, God, I ain't having this. This doesn't understand. I don't get this. He's wondering, then he's waiting, and then eventually nothing has happened, but something happened inside the prophet. And he begins to worship. See, this is a worship not for what God has done, or for what he's doing. This is a worship for who God is. This isn't about trying to make the best of a bad situation. This is deeper. This is a worship from within our souls of saying, God, I am worshiping you for who you are. Not because you are who I desire you to be. Not because it makes sense, but I am worshiping you because you, my King, are still on the throne, even though it doesn't feel that way. That is beautiful. That is where doubt can lead us. But he had to go through that process to be able to get there. Take a look at this part. His heart has completely changed. The circumstances have not changed, but his heart has changed, right? He was able to express the doubts. He was able to express the frustration, and God met him there and gave him a different heart and a different perspective. This is part of the worship song. He says, I heard I heard and my cry pounded, right? He heard about what was happening. He heard the Babylonians are going to come and conquer, and he ain't liking it, and he's fearful, but he's still going to worship God. Check it out. It says, I heard and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay swept into my bones, and my legs trembled because I was so scared. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. In other words, he's saying, I trust you, and I will wait patiently for our people to be invaded. Now take a look at verse 17 on. This is so powerful. I know it's hot, but look at this. It says, though the fig tree does not what? Bud. And there are no what? Grapes on the vines. Though the olive crop what? Fails. And the fields produce what? No food. In other words, everything is bad. Nothing is working. Everything is horrible. The AC don't work. Though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet, take a look at verse 18. This is so powerful. It says, yes, nothing is making sense. Everything is falling apart. Yet, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in my Savior. Not because there are grapes on the vine, not because they're not going to attack us anymore, because you are who you say you are, and you have given my heart the ability to trust you, and therefore I worship you whatever comes my way. Whatever comes my way. On this side of heaven, that's hard. On the other side of heaven, it would all make sense. But we're on this side, where we can still bring our doubts, our frustrations, and just say, God, this doesn't make sense. But I still want to believe in you. So what we're taught here is that we don't give up on our doubts. We take our doubts to God and we hang on to him. And he renews our hearts. Let's pray.